Salam, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on Zoom. I'm Nazish. I'm the Executive Director at Sakeenah Canada. Today I'll be hosting a live here on Zoom with Ruh. I have Runda here with me, who is a mother of two children and a pediatric occupational therapist at Ruh. Runda currently works with children with various needs, sensory, emotional, academic, developmental, and physical, both in school settings and within their homes. Runda also has experience working with adults in need of mental health support. Runda is very passionate about maternal mental health and children's emotional and mental well-being. Additionally, Runda has an online platform on Instagram and Facebook dedicated to these important topics, and you can follow her at Mother Care Journey. Runda, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Nazish, and thank you to Sakeenah Canada for inviting me today. I'm really excited to be here, and it's such an important topic, so I'm glad we're talking about it. I think that when we're in the midst of these really difficult world events, we can sometimes be so consumed with our own coping and our own grieving as parents, because it's a lot and we're exposed to so much, and that we sometimes forget that our children are watching us. They're watching us closely. They're learning about how to cope with the world and the things that are happening. They're trying to piece together little things that they're hearing in our conversations to make a complete picture of what's happening in their minds. So it's really important that when we're experiencing these difficult world events, that we don't assume that our children aren't aware that there's something happening. Children are very good at picking up on those little subtleties, those details. They hear us having these conversations with each other. They hear what's on the news. And it's really difficult for them to formulate their ideas about it. And it can become very scary in their minds when they feel like they're going through it alone. And I always say it's scarier for a child to feel like they're alone in an experience than the experience itself sometimes. So we just have to be aware that our children are watching us. And it's so good that we're having this conversation today, because I'm going to go over, based on their age and their developmental level, how we can actually speak to our children and have these healing circles at home. So as I was saying a little bit earlier, when children are experiencing or witnessing distressing events, they really struggle with filling in the gaps, right? Because they're seeing little bits and pieces. And if we don't help them fill those gaps, it becomes very difficult for them to process and to cope with it. It's kind of like someone showing you a movie and cutting out different parts of it. And by the end, you're like, I don't know what happened here. And because their brains are still developing, they just don't have that ability to do that, the same thing that we'd be able to do in being adults. So they might start looking for information elsewhere. Even they might start asking classmates and friends, and we want them to come to us. We want our kids to feel like you can come to your parents and we will answer your questions, and we don't shy away from having those really hard conversations in our family. So I always suggest that when there is something difficult going on, that we are proactive and we sit with our children and we talk to them about it. We don't always wait for them to come ask us, because they might not even know how to verbalize what is happening. Can you tell me what's going on? They might see that their parents are dealing with so much distress that it becomes like, I don't want to burden them. I don't want to go to them and ask them questions. And I think we might all here as parents have, a memory of us being children, watching our parents watch the news and just feeling like, I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to ask what's going on. And I grew up in a household where Al Jazeera was on like 24 hours a day. So I clearly remember being a child and seeing all the things that were happening throughout the world and all these years, and just seeing that it was so distressing for all the adults around me. So it's important that we sit our children down and we talk to them, and I'll be talking about the healing circle portion in a little bit too. But I find that with any difficult experience, and you can apply this to any other challenging thing that your child is going through, whether it's at school, whether it's a family dynamic issue that's happening, and especially what's going on in Palestine right now, it's to narrate it kind of like a story to them, because that's how they're able to piece together all these different aspects. And a story is just it's so easy for children to comprehend. So to kind of start off by telling them what's happening, giving them a little bit of historical context depending on their age, because they're probably wondering, how is this happening and why is it happening? And is it going to happen to us where I'm living? And children start to have questions about their safety and all of that. So I'll be talking about the different age groups, but just as a tip to kind of narrate things like a story, even when you're debriefing with your child after an event, like something difficult happened that day for them at school, to sit with them and explain to them the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's kind of like you're wrapping it up for them, and like you're putting a period at the end, and you're helping them process and make sense of what happened. So in terms of the different ages, so I have a 5-year-old and I have an 8-year-old. So with my 5-year-old, I didn't really talk to her about what's going on. The only time I did was when she came and asked me something because she heard me talking to my son, my older child, about it. So for children under 5, they're kind of in their own little world, and it's better that we don't take them out of it. I just don't see a necessity for us to talk to them about the really difficult things that are happening in the world. It just doesn't yield a lot of positive outcomes for them at their age, and it's just not necessary, I find, because then not only are you trying to deal with your own emotions around it, now you're having to help a child who's really, really not developmentally ready to hear these things or process them, and you're having to help them with their emotions. And they might actually exhibit these difficult emotions through their behavior most of the time, right? They start having trouble sleeping, trouble eating, outbursts, all of those things. That dysregulation starts to appear. And that's kind of one more thing that you have to deal with. So I would say under 5, just to try not to expose them also to pictures or videos. And if you're watching the news at home, it's probably best not to have it on the TV where everybody can see it. If you're going to watch it, it's probably better from your own device when they're not around. So that's kind of that younger age group. For children between, I'd say, kind of 6 to 12, they've likely heard snippets of what's happening, especially on the older part of that age range. So they probably heard about it at school. They've heard about it from cousins, family members. They've heard us, their own parents, talking about it. They've probably seen our emotions, right? And there's nothing wrong with showing your child your emotions. There's nothing wrong with them seeing you crying about what's happening, and that you're feeling all that compassion and all the emotions that come with witnessing something like this happening on the other side of the world. Even it's part of our compassion as an ummah, and it's something so beautiful to show your children and to model to them that it's okay for us to feel how we're feeling about this, and this is how I cope with it. So you're actually giving them a golden opportunity to learn how to cope when things are really difficult, and how we use our faith to strengthen us. And it's probably one of the best learning opportunities. It's so much more effective than talking to our children about how to cope. And it's them seeing us in the flesh, how we're dealing with these really hard experiences and emotions. So for that, 6 to 12 age range, this is where it's a really good idea to kind of have that healing circle at home. So it's basically, you can make it as informal, as comfortable as you want. Just bring your children together. You may have already done this. I mean, it's been 6 weeks or so of this challenge that we're all experiencing. And if you haven't yet, it's not too late. If you want to do on an ongoing basis, even better. But just to bring your family together and say something like, it's been a difficult time lately with what's been happening in Palestine to our brothers and sisters. And I want us to have the opportunity as a family to just sit and talk about it. Because I think it's important for us to talk about our feelings and our thoughts and how we can help and what we can do, because we each have a responsibility, right? Something like that. And if you have different age ranges, it still works. Just bring everybody together. So we hosted a few healing circles here locally with different age groups, and they all went really, really well. And you can just see the emotion and how deeply all of these children were experiencing this. And they were clearly hearing a lot about it at home, which is great. But they had the ability to just come and offload and to talk about things that they weren't really allowed to talk about at school. They felt kind of isolated. They felt like, there weren't a lot of people around them talking about this, or their teachers said they couldn't talk about it. And then at home, they may have felt like, everybody's really busy just trying to cope with their day-to-day struggles around this. So having these healing circles as a community is important, but then it made me think having them at home is so, so essential. And having our homes be places where our children are allowed and encouraged to speak about their feelings and their thoughts and ask questions. So bringing everybody together, sitting down, asking your children what they've heard, right? Saying, have you guys heard anything that's been really confusing, or you want more clarification on what's happening? Telling them you can come to me for information. And if I don't know the answer, I'll try and find it. And then asking them to share how they feel. And they might struggle with this at first. I think it's a really hard skill sometimes to pinpoint exactly how we're feeling, but it's so important to help our children label and identify their emotions, because the way I explain it to them is when you're feeling all these emotions, your brain is spending so much energy and resources trying to figure out what you're feeling. Your brain doesn't like ambiguity, doesn't like when there's just feelings and emotions happening, and it doesn't know clearly what it is. Are you sad? Are you angry? Are you grieving? Are you disappointed? What's going on? When you label it, and you actually say it out loud, you're kind of telling your brain, I'm feeling very sad about what's happening. I'm feeling angry. Your brain then can divert all those resources from trying to figure out what you're feeling towards helping you cope with that feeling. So that's why it's so important to help our children learn that vocabulary, and just help them understand that all these feelings are normal and they're healthy, and Allah gave us these emotions, and it's actually a beautiful thing to be feeling this way for our brothers and sisters, despite how hard it is for us. So if they struggle to name their feeling, just say, you know what, how about I start? Can I start? And you can share your feelings with them. So I'll pause there and just see if there are any questions so far. If Nazish, you have anything to ask.
Say the idea of having a hearing circle, I think, is such a great idea, because I'm wondering, how do we get children to actually express themselves, right? Or be comfortable, expressing how they're feeling. But I think when they're around people they're comfortable with, whether it be their friends or their siblings, even their cousins, I feel like they'll have a better chance of, or they'll have a better opportunity to open up. And actually, when they start hearing their people that they're comfortable with speaking about what they're feeling, and that they're not alone in feeling that, help them open up, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And just giving them the opportunity to share, and letting them know that feelings are okay. Feelings are nothing we have to be scared of. We don't have to dismiss them, suppress them. Actually, the more we bring them up, the more we're able to deal with them. The more we keep them down and suppress and just kind of, numb or distract ourselves from them, the more they fester. And then it kind of becomes like that volcanic eruption eventually, where all those feelings just come up to the surface, and it's usually at a very inconvenient time where they just come out and they're expressed in usually a not very pleasant way. And that's where we see a lot of children that have behavioral outbursts. It's because a lot of their feelings became literally too big for their body to contain, so it comes out in behavior. So we actually want our children to I always say, we say in the therapy world, better out than in. We don't want things to stay in. We want to teach them how to bring their emotions out in a healthy, adaptive, productive way where they can elicit support from others, right? Instead of getting, punished or getting in trouble or disciplined for their behavior, which is as a result of all these feelings that never got properly expressed or processed.
And even just making that relation, right? The behavior is because of their feeling.
Yeah.
To recognize that.
Yeah, for sure. And you might have noticed that your children have had more behavioral difficulties lately. And I know in my home I have, because I've been really busy. I've been really busy watching the news. I've been really busy keeping in touch with family, and just I know that I haven't been as present as I should be, or as much as they're used to me being. And that results in a little bit of that feeling of disconnection, right? So they're seeking my connection. They're seeking that connection from me through their behavior. So they're fighting with each other because they know that will get me 100% pay attention to what's going on. And it's not manipulative in any way. It's a child seeking connection from their primary caregiver because they see that they're busy, they're distracted with something, and that doesn't feel good to a child. And I fully recognize that. And I actually sat them down, my children, at the beginning of this, and I told them the thing that I did tell my 5-year-old, I didn't really tell her exactly what's happening, but I did tell them, you might see that mama's a little bit busier for the next little while. And it's not because I'm distracted from you, it's because there's a lot happening and I need to be available in other ways right now. But I'm always here. And if you need me, come and tell me. Even if you see that I'm busy, I'm watching something, you're always very, very important to me. And so I told them that. So they will come to me and say, Mama, I really need you right now. Okay, put it down. And I go to them. So I just wanted them to know upfront that you're going to see me probably being a lot busier, a lot more emotional. And I wanted them to know upfront So they're not having to guess, why is mama not playing with us like all the time like she's used to, or why is mama not talking to us as much? Or I just wanted them to be aware of that. And with that, I do still try to be as mindful as I can of their need for connection. So self-compassion for all the parents here as well, that I know that we're not parenting in ideal circumstances, so we're not going to be parenting ideally, right? So I just say we try our best, and having these healing circles will be such a huge contribution to making our homes feeling more emotionally safe and more just to encourage that it's okay for us to talk about hard stuff. We can handle it as a family. Any other questions? Yeah. Anything else from your point?
Anything in the chat? But I did want to ask you about debriefing. You mentioned that earlier in the conversation. I'm familiar with debriefing because we do that at work with the work that we do at Sakeenah. But looking at it from debriefing at home, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So basically, the reason we debrief is because an experience has happened, thoughts and feelings have happened about that experience, and it's all just kind of sitting in there somewhere. And if we don't actually debrief or talk about it, it continues to just fester and just sit there, and we don't actually formulate any healing or any learning or really a lot of or that growth after that, right? And that's why going to therapy is so important, because you're having somebody help you make sense and meaning of what you've experienced in a way that actually contributes to your healing and growth. It's like somebody debriefing with you. This and this happened with you. Now, what's our next step? Or what do you need? Or validation, all of these things that are so important. So with our children, even if it's, and I work in schools, so I see all these things that happen throughout the school day for children that I wonder when they go home if they're going to talk about these things that have happened. And to us, they may seem insignificant, like somebody, pushed you out of line or took your spot, or your friends didn't play with you. But to them, this is so significant. This is their world, right? So when you debrief with your children about any experience, whether it's happening in Palestine or what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, or even, and I highly recommend for parents, even if there's a disagreement that you're having with your spouse or your partner, that you debrief with your children about that after. We don't just leave things, and hope that our children will just get over it kind of thing. No, we go to them and say, you know what, this and this happened today. And again, saying it like a story. So this is how this started, and then this happened, and then that, and then this, and then how it ended. And pause, and just pausing, as you're saying the story, letting it kind of simmer, letting them process it a little bit. And then at the end, just letting them know that, I'm here for you. Is there anything that you want to ask me about? How did this feel for you? Letting them bring all those emotions to the surface and talking about it. Again, it's like you've finished off that thought, and you put a period on it. And now the next morning they're able to wake up, and that experience isn't weighing so heavily on them. They might still be feeling things and thinking about it, which is fine, but it doesn't feel like they're alone and just having to figure out something that's not figure outable for them at this age or developmental stage.
I think that's so important.
Yeah. So, so do you want me to keep going, or do you want me to answer more questions? Or I don't have too much left in terms of the healing circle piece. Do you want me to keep going on that? So in terms of, the healing circle, we said we're going to tell our family we're going to get together and sit and talk about this, asking them what they already know, what they've heard, if there's anything that's confusing, asking them to share how they're feeling, kind of labeling that. And then that validation piece, which is so important, right? Validating their feelings, reassuring them that it's okay to feel how they feel about this, reminding them of how, as an Ummah, we are all like one body, where if one part of our body hurts, the rest of us feel that pain, and how important it is for us to have compassion and to turn that compassion into action, right? So that we all feel a sense of responsibility to do something, no matter how big or how small it is. And so that's kind of the next part, discussing what we can do as a family. So are we, in terms of boycotting or donating or educating ourselves? Can we start reading a book as a family on Palestine? Can we start learning more, educating our neighbors or our family, our friends, our teachers, students, classmates, finding ways to help, because that's, just that sense of responsibility. And it also helps your children a lot. that feeling of helplessness. And I've heard it so much from children over the last few weeks of our healing circles here locally. They're like, I feel helpless. I'm 10. What can I do for my brothers and sisters over there? And that feeling kind of, it eats away at you. So I always encourage them, like, there's so much you can do. Your voice is so important. You can write letters. You can attend events, you can go to protests, you can write, you can draw, whatever it is that can help the cause and bring more awareness, that's really, really helpful. So giving our children the ability to do things and brainstorming as a family, your children might come up with something that you didn't even think about that you could do. There's children that are giving out like care packages and like to people, and like as they're giving them out, they're saying, you know, we're giving these out. We feel a sense of responsibility to help what's happening in Palestine, and we want to help also the people that are locally here. And then it opens up a conversation. There's just so many different beautiful ways to get them involved. And what I keep thinking is that our children will continue to remember this time, depending on their age. If they're, you know, over 6, they'll probably remember this time for years to come. They'll remember the 2023 you know, atrocity that's happening and unfolding, and they'll kind of remember as a family how we dealt with it, how we coped with it, and how we talked about it, or not. So it's really important that we leave them off with, you do have a voice, and there is something we can do as a family.
We do have a question in the chat.
Sure.
Does Healing Circle have a minimum or maximum number of people for it to be effective? Can 2 people have a healing circle?
Absolutely. Yes, you can definitely do it with 2 people.
Child, how effective would that be?
Yes, you can definitely do it, just you and your child. Like that's still, and you can call it whatever you want. Healing chat, healing, you know, make hot chocolate and sit down and drink it together, and just do it however works for you and your child. It doesn't have to be any number of people. A maximum, I think, I mean, we tried running it with a larger group, and we had to split it up into small breakout groups. So it's just, the more people, the harder it is to actually hear from everybody. But I mean, if you're a family, that should be okay. It's just when it's run in very, very large groups that you do end up having to probably bring it down to little groups so everyone gets a chance to share.
For sure.
It's a good question.
I find that, so now when I think about it, like if I think about myself and my children, so my husband and I, we always try to talk to our children before they go to bed. My children, we find that it's sometimes hard to connect to them or even get them to open up. But we find that if we're doing an activity together, such as like playing a board game together, and we don't really call it a opportunity to sit and talk. We're playing a board game, and then that's when we take that opportunity to kind of ask them, like, what's going on, or how are you feeling? And I find that with that little bit of distraction, no matter the age of the child, it could be an easier way to get them to open up. And it's something that we try to do at least a couple of times a week. It doesn't happen every night, but it's like a check-in, right? But we find when there's an activity involved, like you mentioned, making hot chocolate together, doing something together, I find is such a great way to get your children to open up to you, because they're kind of distracted in the activity, but then we take the opportunity to talk to them about hard topics sometimes.
That's an excellent point as well. So having, you know, those face-to-face conversations with our children, and again, it all depends, a lot of it depends on age. So maybe with teens or, you know, older children, it might be a bit easier to just sit down and have these conversations. With younger children, play is definitely, you know, doing it through play can also be really, really effective and helpful as you're building Legos and you're sitting with them, or blocks or board games, out for a walk together. However it is, it's sometimes easier when they're not facing you and you're kind of doing that parallel play, or you're sitting next to them, and you're each kind of doing something, and just, yeah, casually opening it up, like, you know, things have been kind of challenging around here, haven't they? You know, you may have noticed that I've just been a little bit busier. You may have heard things on the news, and I just want you to know that I'm here for you if you want to talk about it. Just something as simple as that. I've gotten in the habit of, before my kids go to sleep, just to ask them, is there anything you're wondering about or curious about that you want to talk to me about? And I hear the wildest things when I ask that, because then it makes me think, I wonder if I didn't ask them that, I wouldn't have gotten to know what's going on in their minds and in their lives. And I'm getting them used to it from a young age so that they know they can just come to me and nothing will really faze me. Like, you can tell me whatever is going on in your mind and we'll talk about it. So it's definitely a beautiful way to just open up that conversation through play, through doing something together, baking together, cooking, anything, a walk, on a drive. It's just sometimes easier to not have that face-to-face interaction with parents, for sure. Are there any other questions?
So there is another question. How to introduce the historical part of the Palestinian cause without affecting the child's self-esteem as a member of the Muslim community?
That's a great question. And that's the thing. What's happening in Palestine and Islamophobia and all of those concepts are so closely intertwined. And you're right, it can definitely affect that self-esteem, that sense of identity. It's really important to always remind them of their worth in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's eyes, like how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us, each with our inherent worth and our sense of dignity, and that it's not contingent upon how other people see us, right? So saying something about, trying, it's hard to explain the history of Palestine in a way that's easily understandable for children. And there's a lot of really good books out there. I think there's one called Zayn and Mira. I believe we read it in one of our healing circles, and it just kind of talks about what's been happening in Palestine. So the way I explain it to my children is, many years ago, another country gave parts of Palestine away to a group of people for them to make their own state there. And it kept taking more and more of the land. And as they were doing that, they were kicking people out of their homes, they were killing them. And it was just, they really oppressed these people that were involved in this. I told them my grandparents were from those people that were expelled from their homes. So they felt that connection, that these are people we are related to, we really know, but you can explain it that these are our Muslim brothers and sisters and this is what they experienced, and that they kept taking more and more of their land, and now they continue to harm them. And as Muslims, we fight against injustice and oppression. That's a big part of our faith, that we don't accept injustice and oppression towards anyone, and that our role is to help our Muslim brothers and sisters. So that's kind of how I went about it with my kids, just a brief history, but you can go in more detail depending on their ages.
Thank you.
And obviously with teens, so I'll just kind of quickly go over the part with teens. So we kind of talked about the younger ones, and then 6 to 12, letting them talk, letting them hear you talk about it. And then with teens, a lot of them have their own devices probably at that age. So they're being exposed to all kinds of things all day long, right? When they're at school. And I was talking to a group of teens, and they're having a really hard time just focusing at school and on their studying and on their exams. And they just got report cards and they're all feeling so great about that. And I had to really just talk to them about, you are here, and I know our hearts and minds are there, but we still have to function here. And as hard as that is, we have to find a way to do it. We have to compartmentalize. We have to have very, very clear times where we need to just maybe put the phone away. It's not selfish. I tell them, we're not helping our brothers and sisters if we're failing our courses here and we're not going to work and we're not functioning. I'm like, that's not helping at all. It's not helping anyone. We need to still find a way to stay focused on what we're supposed to be doing here. So that's kind of where it gets tricky for them, because it's right there in the palm of their hands all day in between classes, or even in class, they're watching the news and they're on social media. So having that conversation with your teens is really, really important, helping them identify where they can have kind of those limits on their screen time, and that you're not being selfish for not watching every video and every picture. You're mindful of your capacity and what you're able to handle and what you need to do in order to function best here.
That's great. There was another question in the chat. Laura is asking, would it be easier to have that face-to-face later on in teenage years if we have more of these healing talks or circles and check-ins in their younger years? Do we define them for what they are with them when they are young?
So in terms of having them when they're younger, so it's easier to have them when they're older, kind of thing.
All right, that what you're
Yes,
looking for?
yes, absolutely. Whatever we start, that foundation that we lay when they're younger is so important because they're getting used to how things function in our family. We're getting them used to our mama and baba, people that I can go to, people that I can actually talk to about things without them kind of, flying off the handle or becoming so distressed by what we tell them. So this is where we need to regulate our own emotions. We need to be very mindful. So this is hard when your children come and tell you things that are out of the blue or really, really difficult or something that happened at school that day. And we're just like, okay, I need to regulate myself because I don't want to scare them off. Because our children very well may just stop telling us things, right? Or it's it's a lot harder for them to tell us things. So starting off these healing circles, healing chats, doing it through play, just letting them know that I can handle the hard stuff. You can come to me and ask me the hard questions and we will work it out together, right? We teach them right from wrong, we teach them limits, we teach them boundaries, but we also teach them when there's something hard in your life, you come to me, you don't run away from me. And that's something I really try when they're younger right now to instill in them. It's very important and it's such a great question.
I was wondering if you could touch upon validation again, because I know as parents, we check in on our kids, we ask them how they're feeling, or we just look at them physically. Okay, they look good, they're not crying, they're fine. But we take it one step further and actually validate their feelings. And any tips on that?
Sure. So, like you said, they might seem on the surface that they're doing okay. Children can put on a front very easily sometimes, especially when they're older. When they're younger, they wear their heart on their sleeve. You can usually tell when they're upset. But as they get older, and this starts again from a young age, that validation. So even if we don't understand why they're feeling what they're feeling, or we don't think it's really a big deal, to them it's a big deal. I always say it's big in their world, and I need to see that. It's kind of like if you come home after a really stressful day at work and your partner's like, it's really not that big of a deal. Like, why are you so sad? You can imagine how upsetting that would be for you. And you probably wouldn't feel like this person's really an emotionally safe person for you to express those really hard feelings to that you had that day, right? And it might cause problems in your relationship. So for our children, it's, I might not get it why you're feeling this way, but to you, it's real. And I'm going to make sure that you see from my end that it's real. I'm not dismissing it. I'm not mocking it. I'm not minimizing it. And at the same time, I'm not feeding into it. I'm not letting it become my emotion. So I'm able as a parent to see that this is what you're feeling and I have empathy and compassion for it. I validate it. I tell them, it makes sense that you're feeling that way. It makes sense that you're sad that your friend didn't let you play today at school with them, or it makes sense that you feel, disappointed that I couldn't make it to this event at your school today. That makes sense. And when your child isn't showing that emotion, but you know that there's probably something going on, again, trying to come at it from the standpoint of just approaching them and saying, I'm here for you. I know you might be going through something, and I want you to know that you can tell me anything that's going on, and I'll be here for you to help you work through it. And over time, the more we say these things, the more our children internalize it. And then we don't have to necessarily try and drag it out of them. They'll start coming to us just to know that we can handle their feelings. Their feelings aren't too big for them. And when they see that we are firm in our boundaries, that even if my child, especially the younger ones, are having a meltdown, they want a cookie and I say no, I can have empathy and compassion and validate, you're sad because I said no. That makes sense. Of course you're sad. You wanted that cookie and I said no. But I hold my boundary. I'm still not giving it to them, but it doesn't mean I can't have empathy and compassion and validate how they're feeling. I hope that answers that.
Yep. I know there is another question in the chat. The cognitive ability of young children does not help them visualize and understand the reality. So how to make it easier for the parents to tackle the issue?
So, and it depends on the age of the child, right? So definitely children, very young children, they don't have the cognitive capacity to visualize. And that's why we try to really, really simplify. We try to keep it very simple. We try not to expose them to images and videos that are very distressing that adults can't really even handle at times. So being very mindful of what you're saying around them, what you're saying to them, and just, yeah, keep it as simple as possible. And we have the Prophet, peace be upon him's example, alayhi salatu wasalam, how he used to cater the way he talked to people based on their developmental level and how he talked to children. So we have an amazing role model to learn from, and just not to feel like you have to explain in depth. And even if they have a lot of questions, just to keep answering it as simply as possible, keeping in mind where they are cognitively.
Great, thank you. Okay. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Were there any final remarks you'd like to give, Runda?
Just kind of reiterating the importance of us having these talks with our children, making it a common thing in our home to talk about emotions. I think we sometimes shy away, or we fear them, or we don't want our kids to be like, I think we sometimes think emotions are our weakness, or they make us too soft, but actually emotions are a superpower. If you learn how to recognize, cope, manage, express them in a healthy way, like emotional intelligence is one of the best things we can teach our children from a young age. It's actually one of the best gifts we can give them as they grow up and as they enter into all kinds of fields in their life. Learning how to be aware of their emotions and how to control and manage and process and cope with them, we are setting them up for a lot of success. And that starts from within our homes from a young age. I've worked with a lot of children who never had that ability to express how they're feeling, or if they did, they got in trouble or it was discouraged. And that has negative implications. I'll tell you that for sure. There are negative implications. And when they become teens, they start to divert to other ways of managing their emotions, which aren't healthy. So I hope that's kind of a helpful thing to leave off with. And actually, one more thing for all the parents, I really hope that you are getting the support you need as well. Because I can never have a talk about children without pairing the parents' mental health and well-being with it as well. We're all under a significant amount of stress right now as parents. We need to have self-compassion. We need to kind of give ourselves a break sometimes, that we're not going to be perfect. We're not going to show up perfectly for our children. And the moments that we don't show up perfectly, we do the repair work. We go after we debrief with them. We say, I'm sorry, I didn't respond to you the way I should have. And I'm just going through a hard time, and I'm trying my best to take care of my emotions so that they don't come out on you or anyone like that. So imagine the modeling that you're doing for your children when you do that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to thank you, Runda and Ruh, for this very valuable conversation. All the information you shared, I think, was so helpful. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. And inshallah, we'll be doing many more therapeutic techniques and activities, for sure.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for having me. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.